Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Welcome to Pingry's second annual College Athletics Recruiting Night that's co-hosted by the Pingry College Counseling Department and Pingry Athletics, and spearheaded by our very own college recruiting coordinator, Joe Kinney. Tonight's a chance to learn more about college recruiting, the college recruiting process, from the coach's perspective. We're excited to be joined by 4 coaches this evening from 3 different colleges: Drew University, Lafayette College, and Princeton University, and 3 different sports: field hockey, 4 different sports: field hockey, women's tennis, and men's lacrosse. So I'd like to take a minute to introduce each of the coaches. Jennifer Stone is the head field hockey coach at Lafayette College. She just completed her 11th season at the helm of the Maroon and White during the 2023-24 academic year. Jen graduate has previously spent 6 years as an assistant with the Leopards after finishing her playing career as one of the most successful players in program history. She led Lafayette to a 12-7 record in 2023, including a 5-1 mark in the Patriot League. Off the field, Lafayette field hockey has maintained a 3.0 GPA or higher every year under Coach Stone, and includes multiple academic All-Americans and Patriot League scholars. While playing both field hockey and lacrosse at Lafayette, she graduated with a degree in economics and business and art, and has a master's degree in sport and recreation management from Temple. So welcome, Jen. Next, we have Dan Lytle, who's the head men's lacrosse coach at Drew University. A former standout for the Drew men's lacrosse team, Dan will enter his 3rd season as the Rangers head coach this spring. In his 2 seasons as head coach, he's guided Drew to a lot of improvement, including more wins in the past 2 years than in the previous 5. He's coached in high school, he's been a Division II and Division III coach in college, and he has experience as a player and coach for the Irish national team. He's had a career in leadership development, including co-authoring a book, Team Turnarounds, a playbook for transforming underperforming teams. He graduated from Drew with a degree in English and philosophy, and earned a Master of Arts degree in child development, and then went on to get a doctorate in psychology from West Virginia University. Damian Hume is our associate men's tennis coach at Princeton University. Go Tigers. He joined the staff in 2015, and during his time at Princeton, he's helped lead the team to numerous ITA top 50 rankings and tournament appearances. They have done very well while he's been there. I won't go into all of it, but prior to Princeton, Coach Hume was an assistant coach at Michigan State and at Boise State. A South African native, he studied at Boise State, where he played the team's top position and singles and doubles. He graduated from Boise State in 2012 with a degree in psychology. And then finally, Jamia Jackson, the head women's tennis coach at Princeton University. She is the 9th head coach in program history and enters her 2nd season leading the tennis program. Oh, go Tigers again, sorry. It didn't take long for Jackson to make an impact on Princeton. She guided them to the 2nd round of the NCAA tournament. She's a former professional player. She comes to Princeton with coaching experience at both collegiate and national levels. She played full-time on the WTA circuit, achieving a career rank as high as 43. She played in all 4 Grand Slams. Pretty impressive. And she has notched wins over Maria Sharapova, we all know her, and a number of other former top 20 players. So those are our 4 coaches who are here today. And then lastly, I'd like to introduce our 2 staff members who are here today. Joe Kinney, our college athletics recruiting coordinator, who's a history teacher, permanent sub, coach, and spent most of his career coaching baseball, first as assistant coach at the U.S. Naval Academy, and then as head coach at Lafayette College for 21 years. And then Mr. Kinney, along with Dr. Fisher, who is our director of the Center for Performance and Leadership, will lead today's program. So, looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say. Joe?
Thank you, Carter. All right, so as you know, we send out a survey to see how many people we expect. We had RSVPs for over 250 people, believe it or not. So maybe it's a late arriving crowd, but thank you very much for attending. Before we get into our coaches and hearing their thoughts and experiences, I just wanted to share some absolutes that I kind of came up with as I'm thinking about recruiting. A lot of it based on my experiences. I'll go through this very briefly, and we may come back to some of these topics as we get into our discussion. First off, student athletes need to own the process. You're the one going on to play. You need to email the coaches. You need to write the emails. You need to be on the phone. You need to be sending them the documents that they need. Mom and dad are supportive, but they cannot be the primary drivers of the recruiting process. Recruiting's a two-way street. Coaches are recruiting you. You're recruiting the coach. You're recruiting the school. So always keep that in mind. Academic and athletic development, that should go without saying. Obviously, you're going to improve as you go through college. You're going to put a lot of time into your improvement. That's really important in who you are as a person, and then ultimately where you're going to go to school and maybe where you're going to play. Tied into that is the academic and athletic fit. As you develop, that fit becomes clearer, what your academic abilities are, what your athletic abilities are on the field, what level maybe you can play at. Do your homework. There's a lot of information out there. It's a touch of a button. You can find out information about a school's academic programs. You can find out information on the athletic program, rosters, who's graduating, how the team has fared, where the coach has been, how long have they been at the school, et cetera, et cetera. Division I versus Division III, I put that up there. Going back maybe 15, 20 years, looking at all Pingry graduates who've played in college, they've all played either Division I or Division III. There is a Division II, but for our purposes, we're mostly focusing on Division I. There are some differences, mainly in terms of scholarship, in terms of eligibility, in terms of recruiting rules. So knowing that information just could be helpful and potentially ease some stress. Consider your options. As a baseball coach, one of the best baseball teams in the country right now is Vanderbilt. They've been that for maybe the last 10 years. So we used to always say, everybody wants to play at Vanderbilt. That's kind of obvious, right? Not everybody can play at Vanderbilt, right? So understand that. There's a lot of places out there that are going to offer the sport that you play at a variety of schools that probably can also do really good things academically for you. So being able to pivot, being able to look at different places, different schools, having different thoughts, keep your options open, keep your mind open. Scholarship realities, approximately 2% of high school student athletes get scholarships at Division I institutions. Division I, Division II are the only schools that are allowed to offer athletic scholarships. Division III is all need-based financial aid or academic merit type aid. Of that, you have men's football, you have men's basketball, women's basketball, I think you have women's tennis, volleyball, and there might be one other women's sport in there that are considered head count sports, meaning they have enough scholarships for everybody on their roster, at least per the NCAA guidelines. Every other sport is considered an equivalency sport. Baseball, for example, we have a roster of 35. We had 11.7 scholarships per 35-man roster. So my point is, most scholarships are going to be partial scholarships, right, if you're someone even in that category to begin with. And the final thing I tell a lot of our students that I talk with here at Pingry, be organized. Whether it's a spreadsheet, an Excel sheet, a diary, a log, keep track of all your communications with coaches, with schools, what you've sent them, phone calls, visits, are you meeting somebody, et cetera. That way you don't happen to mention, as you're talking to the Lafayette field hockey coach, dear Coach Stone, I'm looking forward to be a Lehigh Mountain Hawk. That's going to be a really big problem for somebody from Lafayette, right? So you don't want to be able to do that. Being organized is going to help you do that. Okay, so those are my absolutes. On with our night. I'm going to turn the mic over to our coaches one at a time. They're just going to give their thoughts on recruiting, some of their philosophies, hearing that, and then we'll go into our question and answer with the coaches. So Jennifer, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. Well, first off, thanks to Pingry and the athletic department for hosting an event like this. I think it's such a important aspect to the development of student athletes that have aspirations to play in the collegiate setting, and equally for the parents. So well done to all of you for taking the time to be sitting in the seats. In terms of recruiting philosophies, I think every coach obviously is going to be a little bit different, but from my perspective, I suppose I would answer that question by, I think an important question to ask as student athletes is, what is a person's coaching philosophy? And they may have an answer, they may not have an answer. But for me, my recruiting philosophy stems back to my coaching philosophy, and really what environment we try to create in our locker room. So, we have core values within our program, and I recruit to core values. I don't recruit to skills. So I think that's probably the most poignant part to hear. Being a good person and how you hold yourselves, that for me is way more important than what the skill acquisition is and what the skill looks like, because the reality is you are inviting players into your living room. You're inviting players into the equivalent of your dining room, So getting good people is paramount, and then after that, that's where the actual skill and hockey comes. So it's you're never going to go wrong by doing the right thing, I suppose.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here with you and share our thoughts, and thanks to the staff for putting on this event. I likewise agree this is incredibly important for high school students to just educate themselves, and so hopefully you guys have questions afterwards. If not, that means we did a great job explaining, guys. But I think I echo a lot of the sentiments of the coach to my left. Most coaches will do the same. Character comes first. There is also a skill portion. I'm not going to deny that. There are realities as a coach for what you want to be able to bring to the win-loss category, and there is a skill portion of that, but it comes second to the character, to the off-court skills that a player has, their ability to manage their time, their ability to be organized, how they treat other people. Those things matter far, far more than the skills that they're bringing with them to college in their particular sport, I would say. So my philosophies kind of revolve around the same core values.
Yeah, thanks for being here, obviously. I think what's being said is really important, too. I find it really fascinating that there's a lack of insight related to the recruiting process with all of the club opportunities that current players have at the high school level, and there's so many more resources, but most of the conversations I have with families revolve around the actual process. And to be clear, I coach at Drew, a small Division III school, but I also coach pretty extensively on the club level. I coach a number of national teams, and I work with a number of different groups regionally. My point is that even with players who are getting called, in my sport, the first point of contact is September 1st at your junior year for Division I coaches. Division III coaches can talk to you throughout your career, but even with guys who are getting calls on September 1st from some of the top schools in the country, I had a number of conversations with families on September 1st this year, and they didn't. There's so many questions. So I just applaud you for being here and trying to absorb this type of this information, but also just to have the dialogue. In terms of recruiting philosophy, I also think this is a fairly distinct point of difference. I might express a number of points of difference because we're all different institutions, and every institution is different. But for Division III, a lot of what I do, there's a marketing element to a lot of what I do just to get the brand out there. I'm a new coach at Drew. I went to Drew. I have an affinity for the school, but I played extensively after I went to Drew, and I coached quite a bit after I went to Drew. So I believe in the institution, and there's a lot of effort behind just letting people know. We're out there, bringing them over to campus, and really just trying to bring them in the fold. As it relates to character specifically, obviously we think a lot about that, but I think we have the opportunity to think about that in the context of what student athletes can become and be explicit about it through the recruiting process, as opposed to we're pretty clear that we don't find a lot of like fully baked potatoes, you know, like we're looking for people who can develop and evolve, and we really embrace that as part of our recruiting approach. Because the reality is, if guys can check the social, educational, and athletic, all three of those boxes at a high level, they might be looking at a Division I school or just be looking at different options. So for us, we want to be able to express that we can kind of help them in their journey.
Hello, everybody. I'm Damien. Been at Princeton for 9 years now, and one of the things I love, we actually have a junior program that we actually run on the side with a bunch of middle school and high school students that play tennis, and we run that twice a week, actually sometimes 3 times a week. So I'm having these conversations constantly. And I think it's been mentioned a couple times, but one thing I almost envision and I picture is an environment, but actually like not a constant environment, but something that happens daily. Like what am I creating for people, and how are people going to fit into that? Are they going to fit into that? I think also with us, we talk to our team a lot. So they meet with the recruits, we talk to the recruits. I ask the recruits a lot of hard questions. I want to know who they really are. I want to know how they tick, not in a good or bad way, and I want to see how that's going to fit with us. I think first and foremost, like playing sports is fun. I think that's why people got into it. And I want to have so much fun on the court. Like I still have tons of fun on the court. When I get out there, I play, and I love it, the passion, and I want to bring that out of people. So my thing first and foremost is to have a lot of fun when I get on the court, but I am also very competitive. I think I played at not junior level, which is a little bit higher level, but I played at a decent level, and I want people to see what they can do. I want them to push their boundaries in anything that they're doing. And that could be just like a track workout. It could be anything. It's like, what can you do? Hey, if it's a 6-minute mile, great. Let's try to get a 5:40 mile or whatever that looks like. So it's constantly making sure that people are in a good environment where they're going to be happy, they're going to enjoy it, and they can push those boundaries. And how can we facilitate and create an environment where they can do that? My coach in South Africa told me one time, he's like, when I was getting recruited, he's like, are you going to be happy there? Because if you're going to be happy, you're going to flourish. Plain and simple. And I'm like, that's where I'm going to be happy. And from that, that's exactly what I tell people. It's just like, okay, forget about the name, wherever you're going, because like even when I got recruited, I was looking at 5 top 10, 6 top 10 schools, and I went to a school that's 35 in the country. And I was like, no, because I'm going to be happy there. So I think that's key and first and foremost. Yeah.
So since we're kind of in this line already, and just, tonight we've got some questions that we're going to ask, obviously, but also some scenarios that we're going to ask our coaches to respond to, that if they had this happen to them, how would they respond? But since we're on this topic of intangibles and character and soft skills, how can high school athletes and recruits, how can they highlight these things that aren't necessarily measurable, right? We can measure their UTR in tennis and their rankings and so forth, how many goals they score in lacrosse or in field hockey, but how can they themselves highlight these soft skills, these intangibles, so you can actually see that, so they are attractive to you?
Who would like to tackle that one?
Boy, jump at once.
I can.
With Jennifer, and then if anyone else, by all means.
I would, first off, I think that is an excellent question because it is an intangible piece. The aspect that I would highlight for you is try and do as much as you can to put yourself in front of coaches that you have a sincere interest in the program. So whether that is going to camps, going to clinics, going to youth programs, whatever way that you can demonstrate some of those soft skills to the coach. Another avenue, just as a suggestion, recommendation letters and references can be helpful. They're not everything, but I think the biggest message to hear is if that's something you want to try and sell and promote, you have to be able to visibly see an action with it. So again, try and get in front of coaches as much as possible.
That's excellent advice. I was looking at Damien. I'm curious to hear what. Do you want to go first?
No, go for it.
All right. Yeah, I think it's interesting to be up on stage with someone that I work with on a daily basis, because I could definitely see his thought process and also see it reflected in, the work, the daily work, and in the team, And I really think that underlines everything. I mean, my father always tells me that whatever you do in the dark, it will come to light. And I think that's true. Coaches are always watching. Like, even when you think they're not paying attention, they're talking to people, they're looking at your social media, they're watching you at tournaments, and everything you do kind of, it's gonna reflect. They're gonna kind of draw an opinion from it. And I think that the most important thing is to be yourself, be who you are, because I think that shines through, and you will find your avenue if you do that. It is a situation where, as much as we're looking at you and we're interviewing you, you guys are interviewing us as well, and making sure that it is the right fit for you and that you're going to be happy and that we're going to be happy as well. I think that's all that a coach really wants, to see you at a place where you are happy and healthy, and that's really where you're going to thrive and become the best that you can be, and I think that's always success. So yes, just know that there are always kind of, there are eyes on you, kind of, even when you think you're maybe getting away with something and maybe putting your best foot forward. When you know people are watching, they're looking at you even when you think they're not. So I think that really shows who you are, when you think people aren't watching you, what you do, and people take your core values and your character from that, who you are off court, at least in tennis, or off field or off the ice. That really is who you are on court. You can't turn it on or turn it off. So I think that is kind of how you show what you're all about.
If you have something you want to add, by all means. You don't have to.
Yeah, no, actually, I love this. Actually, I think one of the things, I think is self-reflection, I think is really, really hard. I think having people in your lives that maybe not just parents, but mentors, and I think like that's what we try to do, I think as coaches all the time, is almost being present and then helping people be self-reflective. And I think understanding that, especially when you're young, I think can be a little bit hard, especially with all this pressure and people watching you. But asking those tough questions, of yourself, and then other people that you can trust. Like, I think it's such a huge thing. Like, I mean, I sit down with my guys all the time. Even yesterday, I'm talking to one of our French guys and just talking to him about goals and how you do things, how you're doing little things. And, then we got out on the court, and then he's like, my heart's beating 200 miles an hour. And I'm like, great, let's keep going. Let's get out there. And then afterwards, and we talk about why do we do that? What is the reasons behind that? I think is so key. And I think having mentors in your life, I had so many people, coaches and everything that I was talking to, just to understand, because I think it's sometimes hard just to be self-reflective. But I think also, like, the one thing I'm constantly watching is motives. Like, what motivates people? Why are they doing it? And I think that's so key, because we can see clear as day why people are doing certain things. Like, if people are doing it for the wrong reasons, or why they're doing certain things, or people are putting it on. I think it's pretty easy. We've been around a few times. So it's like, okay, be genuine. Like, we want to know. Get recruited by Prince, I'm going to ask you a tough question, so you'd be ready for that. So coaches want to know who you are.
Thank you. All right, I have a recruiting scenario. Dan, one of your top recruits has verbally committed but has not signed a letter of intent. That doesn't happen with Division III, or has not been admitted to your school yet. It's been brought to your attention that the student athlete posted questionable content on Instagram criticizing the validity of the most recent election. Previously, he has posted on Instagram his commitment to your school. Furthermore, student organizations at your school have picked up on these posts and the connection to your program. Consequently, they are demanding a response. How would you handle this?
I mean, yeah.
So for context,
Yeah.
these scenarios are scenarios that I experienced over
Yeah.
my time. I didn't make them up out of the blue.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Luckily, this hasn't happened to me, but I think that with a lot of these types of scenarios, it's an opportunity to engage in a dialogue. For me personally, I mean, just kind of dovetailing some of what was said, if you want to Brandon's initial question, not that I'm dodging this question, but related to character, if this is a reflection of character, then it's an opportunity to just engage. I would be interested to understand what the motives might be and why, and I would probably just have a conversation with the person and then just kind of take it one step at a time. I think that through the process, you owe it to yourself to be yourself, and that it's really, there's a degree of, it's analogous to a relationship, right? And you kind of owe it to yourself to just be you and trust that the person on the other end, in this case the coach, is gonna wanna you to be part of the team, and then like vice versa. You're working together. I mean, I tell our guys all the time, we're teammates. I mean, you can call me coach, I can call you a midi, but at the end of the day, we're all teammates, right? So in this particular scenario, I don't want guys to run and hide with who they are or not be themselves, but it's also my responsibility to maybe rein it in, or at least talk about where it's coming from and have a deeper, to trying to gain a deeper understanding of what is motivating the individual in this regard. But yeah, I think with all of these scenarios, you'd be doing yourself a disservice, or this type of conversation. You'd be doing yourself a disservice by just like not being yourself. But be smart in terms of how you present yourself publicly.
Good answer. Thank you.
Does anyone else want to take this one?
All right, how about this one? Is there a point when you will stop recruiting a student athlete who you feel is stringing you along or playing you or your school against other schools?
I'll go first. I'm just very honest with all student athletes. Like, I'm just plain simple. Like, this is where we are. These are some of the people that we're looking at. If I feel like they are going, I'm just like, hey, if you want to talk, you want to talk. That's plain simple. You know where to find me. You know where to call. Like, it's easy as that. I usually don't like to play games. I'm just pretty blunt and pretty straightforward where things are. I think certain coaches might do things a little bit differently. If they're trying to get a recruit to things. But for me, it's just plain and simple. I'm just like, this is who we are. This is how we do things. If you want to be a part of it, let's set up a visit. These are the steps. I'll kind of lay out the steps. Like, hey, we're going to have a call. Do you want to come on an official visit? If there's like, I'm not good, well, you let me know. You let me know if you want that official visit. I'll keep tabs on them, things like that. But I'm probably going to take the next step or grab somebody else with doing that. So I think it's key, from both sides, is that communication and knowing, like, hey, yeah. And again, like, we recruit against like big, in our league, Columbia, Harvard are two big ones that we're recruiting. I'm like, they're great programs. That's okay if you're talking to them. That's who they are. This is us. They are not better. We're not better. We're just different, right? So I think some people just shy away from some of those hard conversations. And I think that's a lot of the times is when they string along because I don't know how to tell them this or that. And it's like, it's okay. You're going to visit Harvard. You're going to visit Columbia. You're going to visit Princeton. That's okay. Plain and simple. And we're going to be different. And again, the one thing I really don't do, I'm like, they've had success. I'm not trying to bash them in front of a recruit. Plain and simple. I'm just, this is who we are. They've done that. We do this. It's a little bit, might be a little bit different and different flavor. So.
Sorry. Yeah, I don't know why I grabbed the mic. I don't have anything to add. Yeah, I think that you are very blunt, so that's very true. But I would agree. I can obviously think of coaches who, like maybe played the game a little bit more. And I think like the student athletes sometimes play the game as well. But I think at the end of the day, it does come back to, like I said, you kind of finding the place where you're going to be happy, healthy, so on and so forth. I think it's harder now as the NCAA has expanded like the number of visits that you can take and things of that nature. So I've seen players this year really struggle with all the options out there because there are so many different options, and you can get like paralyzed for sure with everything that's coming at you. So I would say try and keep it as simple as possible for yourself and be as honest as possible with yourself and with the coaches around. It is difficult, I know, like as a 16, 17-year-old kid to talk to adults and tell them, okay, yes, I'm not interested, thank you so much for your interest. And sometimes maybe you fall in love with the attention and things of that nature. But I mean, tennis itself is a super small sport. So people don't forget, how they're treated, even though you are very young when you are interacting with them. So I would just encourage you guys to be honest and upfront as well. And, see if the coaches are that way with you as well. That is how they will treat you when you ultimately are at the school.
Thank you. All right, Jennifer, a scenario for you. You're evaluating a recruit who you feel can be a difference maker in your program. His team loses, or in your case, her team loses a close physical game. As the teams gather for post-game handshakes, you notice that the player conveniently skips the line, staying in the bench area, the handshake line, that is. Do you address this with the player? Do you continue to recruit this player?
Good scenario, good question. I, again, think it comes back to the philosophies, so it's going to come back to the recruiting philosophy of the coach. For me, I would never take one specific instance and make a hard, definitive answer on one specific instance of that. Now, with that said, sportsmanship and the ability to win, the ability to lose is important. But I think that, one, I would definitely notice it, and I would definitely remember it, and it would definitely be something that I would have a conversation with. But it wouldn't necessarily be something that categorically takes them off the list, but it's absolutely going to be a conversation. And just like spoke about before, I want to know why. What was happening in that instance, and one never knows what is happening in anyone's lives, so I want to hear why, and then probably share a little bit of my thoughts about why that actually is important, and again, try and actually coach them even though you are recruiting them. So I think having a conversation to share the importance of it, and hopefully that you would see a change in behavior. And if you don't see a change in behavior, then that goes to the conversation of, well, maybe this isn't the right fit, but I'm sure there's a right fit out there.
Thank you.
Okay, so this one's for the parents. This never happens, though, so I'm sure we won't never have any problems here. But you attend the game for one of your top recruits. You are fully prepared to offer this student-athlete a scholarship after the contest. At the game, you notice the recruit's parents consistently berating the officials and verbally criticizing coaching decisions. How do you proceed? Dan, you want to tackle this one?
That's doing a great job on this.
I feel like I'm getting the hard questions here. That one is interesting because that type of thing happens, and it's bothersome, frankly, because you're kind of getting in this relationship with a family. I just had a conversation with a parent last week that I said to the father I was talking to that, we talk to our guys. We've been saying this to the guys about a few different, there's a lot happening in the world right now, and we've been just saying how we want them to feel like they can be there for each other, and we want to try and develop a culture and an environment where if you trip or fall down, you've got 5 hands in front of you before your head hits the ground because we want to help you up. and I just said to the dad that that extends to the parents too. This is bigger than just, you know, the guys who put their helmets on. I mean, obviously that's our focus, but we want to be there for everybody. So if we get a sense that a parent in this particular instance isn't really with us or might be undermining what we're trying to do, we would obviously want to talk about that as quickly as we can. I think a lot of parents too want what's best for their kids. And so in this type of scenario, a lot of times you can talk parents through this. I just don't want to have that conversation a lot personally. And so in the recruiting process, it's an easy opportunity to kind of move on. I'm not saying that to scare anyone, but I do think that there is a little bit of a reality to that. And for us, again, I'm in a really different type of scenario here, because the truth of the matter is at Drew right now, I'm trying to rebuild a program. So I'm a little more open to conversations. I've been on recruiting panels before where everything that the coaches around me are saying is about why they say no. I mean, for us, we're really building a brand right now around why we would say yes. Like our focus is yes. So in this particular time in my life, I would probably work to try and figure out how we can manage this. But the truth is, at any number of institutions, they don't have to spend the time. So I think it's incumbent upon you as families too to try and determine what the ideal scenario is, because certain schools are scrutinizing everything. Maybe not the whole school, but the coaches, the programs. Anyone want to weigh in on that?
I can just say from my experience, I would always try to contact the high school coach of a player. One, they're coaching that student in an educational setting. So how are they interacting, you know, managing the academics and the athletics, all the responsibilities that go into that. But the first question I would always ask the coach were, talk to me about the players' parents. And, you know, 99% of the time it's positive. But I just wanted to know if we're getting into a situation that is going to potentially cause a lot of problems, because we've all dealt with, quite honestly, parent problems. And as you indicated, I understand where you are at right now, but you also indicated you're probably going to move on. And quite honestly, there were a lot of times I moved on, to be honest. And I know a lot of other people have as well.
Yeah, and I would be open too to those who play club sports. I've actually had this conversation with parents on the club side, maybe not this particular scenario, but I've had this conversation where I've worked with a lot of higher end families in the world of lacrosse, and there are times where you need to remind them, you know, you're kind of not in control of the process. You sort of have to let the process play out. You sending that 12th email might not be a benefit. You approaching a coach out at an event might not be a benefit. So I think to a large extent, to your point, there's an opportunity here to ask. The coaches might reach out to high school coaches, but you also have an opportunity to talk to your club coaches, talk to your high school coaches about, you know, what is okay, what's not, where might you want to dial it down, or do they even have feedback, and be open to it. You know, that's can be challenging at times, but I would just throw that out there.
I think the one thing I think Jennifer mentioned is it a one-time thing. Like, I think that's what we're going to be looking at. I've seen parents and I've seen kids kind of act like that a little bit on the court, and parents, the conversation, if that was what it, you know, tennis is a little bit different, but if that's how they acted, I'm like, yeah, good luck coming to Prince, because you're not going to act like that around our tennis courts. Basically, I just kind of set the tone how it's going to be. If you going to act like that around our refs, then we're going to have a different conversation. So basically, plain and simple, kind of set the tone of how things are going to be, because I'm almost going to look at what's happening to the student athletes. You know, how are they reacting? If parents are going, you know, is the student shying away? Are they, you know, is it going to be better when they're away from their parents for a little bit, being on their own? But I don't want that affecting them when they're on the tennis court or when they're on the field. So for me, I'm having their best interest. So if somebody, and it could be a fan, sometimes we have fans or relatives or anything that be caught. I'm going to set the tone pretty hard and be like, this is what's going to happen. These are the tennis courts, this is our environment, and this is how things are going to go. And we even say to our guys, when it comes to refs, I think there's such a big thing. Well, they're just people. I know we don't see that, and we have you have to have conversations with. I think I talk after every tournament, almost every day, I'm having conversations with refs and just like their thought process and how they, and then where I'm coming from. I'm like, hey, this, and she's like, yeah, you might have seen it this way. I'm like, okay, that's no problem. Like, hey, I think I'm, that's fine. Like, hey, I was a little bit out of line, I apologize. So I think also afterwards is talking to the ref. I'm constantly talking to him, making sure that I have that under control and making sure that I'm not going over, because I also want to model what I want my guys to act like to the refs at the same time, and parents.
Thank you. All right, I'd like maybe to hear from all the coaches on this question. Do you have a process for walk-on student athletes or a tryout process for non-recruited players? So we'll just go right down the line if that's okay.
We, in all honesty, don't really have a process for it. Recruiting for us is, 3+4 years out. So it's a pretty lengthy process. Now, with that said, is there a reality that some players are later in their development phases? Without question, absolutely. But we don't, so Division I institution, we don't have walk-ons, but if a person does express interest, the feedback that they would get is, it will probably be late interest, but can you come to a camper clinic over the summer leading into if you're going to attend the institution, can you come to like an evaluation phase during the summer? But for us, we don't take walk-ons during the year.
Likewise, we do not currently have any walk-ons on the team, and we don't have a process for walk-ons once they are on campus. I think that a portion of that is sort of the nature of women's tennis, that it is, like you said, a full ride sport. And for a lot of kids make their decision kind of in their junior year. A lot of juniors in the 2025 class, for instance, are already committed. And so for a student athlete to wait and maybe pass up a full ride at another school on the off chance that they get into Princeton on their own doesn't happen that often. So we, as on the women's side, we don't have a process for walk-ons.
We don't really have a process either. We are evolving, though. I've been at Drew this is my 3rd year, so we've effectively doubled the size of the roster in the last 2 years. So we're kind of wading into territory where to the points that have already been made, we're engaged in students for 2+ years. So having gone through the recruiting process there, that's pretty much who we're committed to. With that said, we're evolving, and while we don't have a formal process, we would kind of have that conversation. We had a guy this fall. I initially said, I don't see how this is going to work. He came back to me, pled his case. We told him we'd give him a few days. He kept showing up, did a great job, really worked hard, and then he kind of worked his way into the roster. So things can happen, but I'm in a much different place, and even at Division III, there are dynamics where it can be pretty hard to walk on.
When I first got to Princeton, we actually had a walk-on tournament where people would play in it. I think nowadays, I just think because of recruiting and people know exactly what they want. In the Ivy League, where we are, we don't have scholarships, but we have supported spots. And honestly, once it gets past that roster cap that we want to be at, whether it's sometimes between 9 and 12, once we go more than that, we just feel like we're taking away from people. So I think every year is different. Like I always tell recruits, like even when I was at Michigan State, it's like every single year is going to be a little bit different. We might have space where, that's going to be great. But I think there's criteria that we always talk about, with people who are going to walk on. Can you play with our number 1 player? Can you go and hit with them and have a good practice with them? Because if you can't, then it's just, I don't want to be sitting there babying somebody. That's just what we're looking at. It's like, I don't want to have to take more time out. And then buy-in. I think the one thing that we're always wary about when people get into Princeton is because they are really good academically, and are they just getting in and then they're just going to fall into that when things get a little tough. And so we want to make sure that people are going to buy in. Hey, if you're in, you're in. If not, that's okay. That's no problem. And I mean, it takes to play a collegiate sport does take a lot of time and it takes a lot of effort. So we're looking at those two criteria. That's our main thing. If they're able to practice with people on our team, fine. But every year, I think every single team every year is always different. What they're recruiting this year could be a little bit different to the next year. Could be a little different spots-wise. Like one year we have 4 spots, one year we have 2 spots. One class might be a little bit bigger. We're looking at somebody, hey, maybe a walk-on, maybe 3 good guys, and we've got a great walk-on that's going to be a great leader on our team. Like we've had 2 walk-ons since I've been in 9 years in Princeton. So it's not impossible. But again, we have a guy on our team right now who's incredible. Like I can literally put him anywhere with anybody. Even Jameer's had him out there. Like he's incredible, and he's just like every single workout all the time. I don't have to worry about him. I don't have to tell him if I'm like, hey, do that. He's like, yep, done. So, and I think it's vetting that process. We'll vet that process in that sense. We're just having those conversations.
In my experience coaching, I was, in terms of walk-ons, we were a spring sport, so we had a fall season where we could afford to carry 1 or 2 extra players to kind of see what they could do. I would term those players often recruited walk-ons, so they were players that reach out to me maybe in March of their senior year. Hey, I got into Lafayette, I'm coming. And I would say, great, okay, congratulations. And then I would follow them during their high school season, probably try to see them play or have them come to a camp on campus that summer. And then as I knew something about their ability, I could offer something more specific in terms of time, in my case, on the field. I also had some guys who would call me a week before school. Hey, do you do any tryouts? I was in the habit of never saying no, so I would offer a 1-day tryout. And in baseball, unless you can run like the wind or you throw it 90 miles per hour plus, you really can't impress in 1 day. It's really hard. And I did have one guy, I cut him his freshman year, and he was persistent, that son of a gun, and he came back the next year and did a couple things I asked him to do, and he wound up being a 3-year player, 2-year starter, and a first-team all-league player, led the league in stolen bases his senior year. So you never know. To Damien's point, each sport is kind of different. It's the bigger roster sports sometimes might be more apt to have walk-ons. But that is a question to ask in the recruiting process, no doubt.
One question I get a lot in my work with athletes, and I'm interested to hear what each of you, how you would respond to this. And Dan actually phrased this in an interesting way of like finding reasons to say yes or finding reasons to say no. What are, I guess, the do's and don'ts for both the recruit and potentially their parents, not only on visits, but really any in-person interaction that you might have with them, whether that's at college showcases, tournaments, and so forth. But any insights that you could provide everyone here about what should recruits, what should parents kind of be mindful of, what could help, what could potentially hurt them on these visits, for example?
I think behavior. I'm just thinking about just some of the people that I've kind of crossed off the list in the last few years. Just attitude on the behavior. I think just a consistent, bad behavior, and I mean a little bit over the top. I think that's kind of the thing that I shy away and I don't really like, because I think it's going to reflect badly on our program. Also, I think people just being very cocky. I really don't like that. I think people who just think they're way too good, or when they're kind of showing off, just talking about how good they are and what they can do. And I'm like, I want that confidence, but I think when it gets past, a certain threshold, it's kind of a little bit of a turn-off when doing that. I love people who are just, want to put their head down, they have that confidence, they're humble, and they just want to do good work. And I think that's so key. I think I'm always projecting, if there's a Princeton logo on their shirt, what would people be saying? And when I'm looking at these tournaments, I remember there's a guy, and again, he's playing at Cornell right now. He's a really good player. He plays like 2-3 for them, and I said no to him. He wanted to come to us, and I'm like, but the way he acts on the court, I'm like, I still don't want him there. Right? Even though he's playing that high and he's playing that well, I'm like, I'd rather not have that image attached to our team, ourselves, even though it might have prevents us maybe, winning 1 or 2 more spots. So behavior, I think, is crucial, and just knowing that, like, every time I'm thinking about it, I'm watching people, I'm just like, I stick the P on their shirt, and I'm like, okay, what do people say? What are people saying with that? And I think that's key, and that's what I'm looking for. I want people to be tenacious. I think there's a very, very fine line of that, and I'm like that. I'm very tenacious. I'm going after it, but I want people to kind of be a little bit humble and just like, hey, let's go after it. So.
Yeah, we think similarly. We want to be around guys that are good people, and so we think about that a lot. The only thing I would really add is that I think that the culture is typically, ideally, going to be stronger than any one individual. So there's a little wiggle room in there, right? I mean, we have an opportunity to maybe bring a guy in who maybe is a little bit more leaning in behavior that I would prefer not to see a ton of, but we would hope that the culture would start to rein it in. But in an ideal situation related to this specific question, I mean, we'd probably ferret that out in the recruiting process, and we'd already start sort of like having some of those conversations. Hey, if you were to come here, we'd want to see this or that, or we think this or that of you, and we think you're at your best when you're doing this or that, so we're going to look to see more of it. And I just had a conversation with a guy about that 2 weeks ago, about specifically academics. But the behavior thing is the biggest concern on my end. That could quickly become a hard no, depending on what we're talking about. And we don't even do a lot of overnights, actually, because I have been having this conversation with a couple other coaches. After COVID, it kind of came to light that, hey, people can make perfectly fine decisions without doing overnights. So then the question started coming up amongst some people I was talking with about, like, well, what really happens on an overnight? And do we really need to even have an overnight? Or can we have someone in for a day, have lunch, have dinner, watch practice, and then we've kind of seen enough? Because there's a piece of me that, and I actually talk to recruits about this all the time when they ask. We will do an overnight if we think it's an important visit, or we just had someone in from North Carolina, so it's hard for him to just come up for a day and then go right back home. So we would certainly do it and accommodate it, but even if a student is really like pushing an overnight, I'm kind of in the back of my mind wondering, like, well, why is that so important? But yeah, the behavior piece is the biggest concern.
I'm trying to rack my mind, I guess, for things that, when I'm actually in it, that have either been fantastic or have been red flags. So I guess to be specific, I think that and I think Brandon spoke to this, if the first email you get is from a parent, that's a pretty bad look. I think it's important that, because I think it's important that players are independent from a academic standpoint, but also on court. I think that that's something that we look for in just a student athlete in general. So I think that's to link it back to something that I said earlier. I think always watching, that things like that kind of put an idea into a coach's head about, like, kind of the makeup of the student athlete that they're recruiting. I think that players who show up on their visits and they're very prepared, I think that speaks volumes. We had one kid come in and, she got her itinerary and she had questions for every person that she met on campus, no matter who it was. And that was, it stood out to everyone, and it was a kid that we were like, wow, okay, we want you to come here, like, that's definitely the impression that you want to leave coaches and the players with, like, excitement for when you step on campus for the entirety of your 4 years. I think another thing that Damien spoke to is that every year is a little bit different, the makeup of the team, and I think two things just to look out for is being unreasonably high maintenance. If you are a player who's looking at coming in and maybe being a walk-on or something like that, and you're asking for the moon, that might be a red flag for coaches, that they might have to babysit or spend an inordinate time with you in comparison to the team, and that breeds discontent just along the entirety of the players. And I think players who are, it's difficult in tennis, I will say, because tennis is, outside of college tennis, is an individual sport, and you come into college tennis and it's the first time that a lot of the kids are on a team, and so that is maybe something that's specific to the sport. But being able to get along with other people, I think I look out for like sort of passive aggression. That's a tough one for competitors. I think that those kinds of like traits sort of breed discontent within a team, and winning can make up for a lot, but if it's a tough season and you kind of have those things going on behind the scenes or running through a team, those things can really, really be toxic. So I think those are just maybe some specifics that I've noticed in my time.
Well, certainly the value of being fourth. I get to listen, and then in an era of trying not to repeat a couple things as I was listening, trying to differentiate and maybe give a couple different ideas. I'd say probably two things of content to that question. The first, in terms of what's important to see, completely agree on behavior, without question, but an aspect of competitiveness, I think, is incredibly important to be any element of a student athlete at any level, Division 1, 2, 3. Sport, for me, sport is about competition. There's other aspects of sport, but there's a really big part of sport that is competition. So what competition looks like to players, what it looks like to families, and you can get a sense of that even in a campus visit, where there's no competition at all, but surely you can get it on the field or in the court or in the pool. So highlighting just competitiveness and what that looks like. And then in terms of a little bit more of like the maybe don't or shy away from, just a little bit of perspective, I think how players respond to failure is incredibly important, and that's something that honestly kind of vet through during on-campus visits, and if you ask a player how their season went or what's been great, what's been a struggle, and if players respond with external factors. It was, as an example, asked a player one time, like, I saw you had a tough loss to such and such team. The first thing that was said was, yeah, our coach didn't prepare us for but. And fair enough, no problem, but that says for me that that player doesn't have an ability to reflect. Self-reflection is massive in our program as well, but getting players that have the ability to look at a situation and always want to do better. So when there's a failure, when there's a tough loss, even when it's a great win, but maybe there's some aspect, for me at least, finding players that have the ability to look at a tough situation and be able to recover from that failure, the ability to build resistance and resilience and toughness, which is an incredible part of being successful as a college athlete, and certainly something that we do look for and try and vet out. It's not an exact science, but important part in recruiting.
Thank you. So obviously today there are a lot of showcases or combine type of events, or certainly tournaments where there are a lot of teams or a lot of players in tennis. How can a student athlete stand out at an event where there are countless number of players or countless number of teams? Obviously their skill is going to help. Is there anything else they can do to potentially stand out?
I feel like I'm on the hook because I already have the mic. Yeah. Is there anything that a player can do to stand out at a tournament? Honestly, I mean, to me, I feel like tournaments are really just a reflection of everything that you've already done, all the work that you have done. And so really what you're looking for at tournaments is, I mean, what I'm looking for is I'm looking to see what people's habits are. I, you know, a big part of tennis is that once you get to a certain level, everyone can kind of hit the ball, you know, and I think that maybe goes back to the skill portion of things. Most people are pretty proficient with their forehands and their backhands and their serves. Some, there's a, you know, a wide range. Some are so amazing that it covers some other things up. But most people are kind of in a similar range where on a day-to-day basis, anybody can kind of beat anybody. Like it's fairly even until you get to sort of the very top. So I think I look to see, you know, the player who's there kind of first, the player who's warming up, the player who's taking care of the little things, because like I think if you don't take care of the little things, you can't really do the really big things. It's the first step. But I don't think that it just starts at the tournament. You know, I think that it is a reflection of what you do on a daily basis. I think probably the other thing that stands out are the players who are asking questions of the coaches, their coaches, me, if we're able to speak, coaches around me. That shows that that player like kind of wants to get better. I think that growth mindset coming into college is huge. It's enormous, and there's got to be some discernment. Of course, there's a player's got to know what they're good at, and stick to that, and have some sort of identity. So you're not remaking yourself, but I think being willing to go outside yourself and ask questions that shows that you're thinking about your tennis or your sport, and willing to continue to learn, although you're at an extremely high level already. Those are kind of two things that stand out. But again, players who are doing that at tournaments are usually doing that all the time, not just at events.
You just said something that brings to mind something I remember from about 30 years ago, believe it or not. I'm at an event in Lexington, Kentucky, and in baseball, at showcase events, typically you have a lot of kids. They don't go as teams, they go as individuals, and they're put on teams. So hitters, if you walk, meaning you get 4 balls, normally you'd go to first base. In a showcase event, they'll let you hit and maybe put somebody on first base. So knowing what you're good at. There's this one kid, he's maybe 5'7", 140. Not real big, not real physical, but he could run like the wind. And every time a kid walked, he would be the guy jumping out of the dugout before a coach or one of the leaders of the showcase directed somebody to go take first base. And he proceeded in the course of the game to steal maybe 12 bases. Steal second base, steal third base, steal second base, steal third base. Before the end of the day, you're like, oh my God, this guy's unbelievable. One, his initiative to jump out there. That's really what caught you first. And then 2, he highlights his best skill at that time in his life, which was his speed, not his strength or swing or whatever. As a side note, that kid goes on to play at Notre Dame, leads Notre Dame to the College World Series as a senior. I'll never forget that. He knew his strengths, and he saw a little opportunity, and he seized it. Doesn't always apply in every sport, I get it. But you said, know your strengths, know what you're good at, and that kind of brought that back to mind. We're coming close on time here. A few more questions just to get your opinions of, and then we'll have a wrap-up question. Do you have a preferred method of communication in the recruiting process? Social media, text, email, phone call?
Not social media, email or text or phone.
Yes, probably text. I mean, I'll use social. Yeah, it's not like I never use it, but I would say text or, hey, phone call. Ain't nothing wrong with phone call.
Yeah, text, phone, or email.
I think you can start with the email, but I think a little little bit emails we get on the phone with people. I think that's such a good thing because I think text you can lose so much, and I think you have to start out with all of that, and I think eventually you have to start out with email. I think text you have to get there, and then you have to get on the phone with the coach. I think that's first and foremost. Even if people that I'm not gonna, maybe I'm like not thinking about recruiting. If I'm on the phone with them, I start talking to them, I'm like, oh, there might spark an interest. So all of a sudden, I'm at a tournament, and I see their name on the board. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go check them out. I remember having a conversation with them. So.
Okay, do you use third-party recruiting services at all? NCSA or something sports-specific? Damien, how about you start?
Unless we have to. I don't usually use them unless people do. I mean, again, we get in so many emails from these people all the time. I'm not even joking, 10, 15 a day that we're getting from these people always. So you can use them. I'm telling you, it's just going to get lost. Again, when they're communicating with us, if it's a text or a phone call, then we might be like, oh, okay, let's see who this person is, or we might be talking to them already. A lot of times we've been talking to a recruiter already, and then they are using somebody already in that process, so we go through kind of those channels and those efforts.
Not really. Pretty much, we would look at someone's site if they were housing film on there or to check out their grades, but that's really it. It's more of an aggregator for your information. In terms of any use I would have from it, I wouldn't go on there looking for players.
Yeah, same. I just think, I mean, my kids, like, they can find anybody in a second, you know, and so, like, I have no doubt that if a kid wants to get in touch with you, they can do it very, very easily. And so it's best to have the player individually reach out to the coach.
Okay. Do you, and Jennifer already touched on this, but do you offer a recruiting camp, and how valuable is that in the process?
Yeah, we definitely do. Our sport is set up so that regionally there's some really great field hockey in the area. So we do quite a lot of camps, clinics, and it's a really big part of our recruiting.
We don't. I think it's for similar. Tennis is so global, so we don't really do recruiting camps.
We have a prospect day, so we do a version of that, but it's pretty small.
Yeah, most large teams, most team sports are going to have some type of prospect recruiting, et cetera, type of camp. Yeah. And you know the coach is going to be watching you. Where you go to a larger event, it's possible to get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, and even at our level, by the time they're coming to a prospect day, every now and then someone will show up, but they've been in touch with me a number of times. And more often than not, I probably know that person. I've seen them play maybe even a dozen times or more. So it's just a way to get to know guys, get them to see the campus. And that at that point, we're already pretty far down the path.
All right, so gone through a lot tonight. Joe and I talked about this leading up to this night about how could we kind of wrap things up, and this is for each of you to respond to. But if you were able to go back in time, knowing what you know now, back then, as a recruitable athlete, how would you go about managing the recruiting process, maybe any differently? Any maybe mistakes that you made back then that you could kind of catch yourself and do better the second time around, so to speak?
I think for me, especially not coming from the States, I didn't really know about colleges or universities. So doing my research, I think nowadays there's so much information out there, and then going on visits, going on talks, even if it's unofficials, and just going to check out places. I think nowadays, all the information is out there, and a lot of the questions that we get from people, it's out there already, so we're reiterating a lot of the stuff that people are asking us or talking to us about. So some of the things that I'll do a little bit different, I would keep asking the tough questions. I did ask a few hard questions, but I'd do a little bit more research and go. I think I was limited a little bit in where I was getting recruited. and I kind of stuck to that a little bit. And I was like, oh, I would have loved to have branched out a little bit. Fortunate where I went to Boise was not on my radar, which was great. So, but I think really branching out and saying, once you get a bias to certain things, that can really navigate a lot of, your decisions that you're trying to make. It's like, oh, I have to go Ivy, or I have to go here. And we're talking to people a lot about that, why they have those biases. And like, hey, check out, we're talking to a recruit right now who's talking to us in Alabama. It's like, Alabama's great. It's different, but it's great. And knowing that and not just having a bias to one thing. So.
Yeah, to that point, I worry about a lot of students and a lot of athletes in the sense that they lock themselves in. And it's, 5 schools or I'm a failure. And I'll just quickly say this. I went, like I said at the onset, I grew up in Morris County. I never heard of Drew. I wound up going to Drew as undergrad. It was a great experience. I went on after that. I played professionally. I played for U.S. national team. I've played in 3 world championships with Ireland, helped them start their program in many ways. So, love what you do, be confident. I say to people all the time, walk through the door that's open for you and make the most of the opportunity you're presented. And see what happens, Just go at it with passion and confidence. And to the point that was already made, if there's any it's don't measure yourself by what doors readily open to you. You can be the greatest player that people may not have heard of and wind up at Drew. And that would be fine. And I've watched any number of athletes go through this and they just beat themselves up through the process. It's miserable. And when it should be exciting. It should be exciting. Whatever schools are calling you, that's great. You're way ahead of the game. 8% of student athletes go on from high school to play in college. So be proud of yourself. They even have an opportunity.
This is a tough one for me. I didn't go through the recruitment process collegiately because I turned pro as a junior in high school. And I think that was the right choice for me at the time. But I think that the world of sports has changed quite a bit since that time, not just tennis, but sports. And if I posed myself to living now, I think if it was back in the day, I would still make the same decision. But if I lived now, I would just, as the coaches have said here, I would be so much more open. I think that it's a different world, in what is available to student athletes in every way, shape, and form. And you guys have so many more opportunities. And I think that if you make choices that close off your opportunities at such a young age, then you could make a better decision, So I think taking time and doing your homework, I don't know how you separate your day, but take 15 minutes away from something that you do, that's excess time for you, and just research some different institutions and see where they are, see, what people who have gone there say about it. Just do your homework, and you may find something that you never thought of that is your perfect fit, and again, you're going to be your happiest and your healthiest there, and then you can go on to soar in ways that you never ever would have imagined. So I think that so young, but you guys are in the driver's seat, and it's such an amazing opportunity in front of you. So I just want to encourage you to take the wheel of it.
I would say less so from my recruiting experience, but just the advice that I would give is maybe a little bit opposite from a couple of the other conversations. Before even thinking about recruitment, make sure that you have a clear understanding of being able to answer the question, I want to play sports in college because of this. and the reason why I say that, it's very easy to get caught up in recruitment, but getting caught up in recruitment because of this school or that school or that school or that school. But truly, why do you want to play sport in college? What does a sport mean to you? What are you looking for? So that's one aspect. And then the second aspect is it goes alongside of it. But I am a principles-driven person, but have an idea of exactly what you are looking for so that you're making decisions or informed decisions or guidance based on what you're looking for as opposed to, again, what's presented in front of you. All within a spectrum of be open-minded. You can say you want a small school, but actually end up going to a really large school, but within that really large school, there's this little pocket that is actually feels like what you're looking for. So have an idea, be informed, take the time to do your homework, but also be open to a lot of different experiences because there genuinely is a fit for everyone out there.
Okay, that was great. That's tremendous information. Excuse me, but thank you to our coaches for making the trip to Pingry tonight to share your experiences. For me, it's valuable to hear different perspectives and different approaches, and I hope for our people in the audience, they got something from these experiences as well. We are taping this. We'll put this on our website, and I'm sure many other student athletes and families will be looking at that, and will also benefit from your comments and opinions, so I appreciate that. Before we leave, how about a round of applause, please, for our coaches. So the camera shut, oh, there it is, okay. I had one more slide, just the resources here at Pingry. So my role, I can meet with student athletes, meet with their families, talk about the recruiting process. Again, it's not sports specific for me, other than maybe baseball, but it's more about the process and a lot of the things we talked about tonight. Educate on rules, things you can do, talk about a timeline if you're a freshman or a sophomore, and so on. You have our college counseling office. My wife's here. She's one of our directors of college counseling here at Pingry, Susan Kinney, Mrs. Kinney. Your coaches, certainly your Pingry coaches. We have a lot of coaches with a tremendous amount of experience and have sent many student athletes on to college. So getting their opinions of where you stand and where maybe you fit, that should be probably the first place you go. Our athletic department staff, we have people that have worked, Ms. Bacher, Mr. Nicholson, who have worked for colleges, have coached and played, so they have wealth of information and experience. Dr. Fisher, in addition to being a longtime psychology teacher here and now the director of the Center for Performance and Leadership, he was a college student athlete and a college coach. So he is certainly someone you can talk to. Our website has a lot of information. We have a new website. You probably have seen that. There's a college recruiting tab now on the athletic page. We didn't have that last year, and that'll be continually updated with new and more relevant information. The NCAA has plenty of resources, sometimes tough to navigate. I can help you do that, but they're a resource. Many individual athletic programs, college athletic programs on their websites have recruiting tabs that have questionnaires, but also have other information. Could be academic guidelines, could be athletic guidelines, could be just recruiting that sport in general, but certainly worth your time to take a look. And then most student athletes who are looking to play in college are playing club, travel, what have you type activities. Those coaches are certainly going to have some sense based on their experiences as well. So you have a wealth of resources, take advantage of them. Otherwise, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate your time and sitting here with us tonight, and hopefully I'll have a chance to talk with you if you have questions, and good luck to you. Thank you.